So I thought I'd start with a little bit of an activity. Don't think it, don't overthink it, just answer the question in your mind on a scale of 0 to 10, how overwhelmed do you feel right now? Think of a number, just make a note of the number, maybe like on your phone or in your mind if you can remember it. We will come back to it at the end, so we'll just give you a couple of seconds. So we thought we'd first start with physical. Obviously there are different aspects of fasting, and Ramadan obviously has the physical aspect of fasting and the benefits of fasting. Obviously it improves our physical health, as we all know about the craze around intermittent fasting, but there is that Islamic aspect where it does improve your physical health, reduces stress, improves focus, and increases our opportunity for reflection. This is very brief, but it's just a reminder for us that there is that physical aspect that is really important to Ramadan as well. Now, when it comes to managing your stress and managing those physical symptoms, there are lots of things that we can look out for, and obviously we're coming from a mental health perspective, so there is that opportunity to really think about what stress symptoms do you normally display when you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed, anxious, low mood. It can come in all different shapes and forms. So we've got the physical symptoms there, so things like palpitations, dry mouth, low energy, insomnia. Obviously you've got emotional symptoms as well, so low self-esteem, agitation and irritability. Behaviourally, it's talking about that constant anxiety, that inability to focus, increased pessimism, as a lot of people often tend to not like to admit to, but that negative mindset can also kick in, and disorganisation. So how many times you feel so overwhelmed, so stressed, and so overwhelmed that you become disorganised. You've got an upcoming exam or deadline or work or personal life, and suddenly you just feel like everything has gone out of your mind. And psychologically, kind of fidgeting, pacing, maybe you keep yourself to yourself and you end up becoming a bit more isolated, and that can affect other aspects of your life, relationships, your appetite, your eating habits, your sleeping habits. And there's lots here that we need to consider when it comes to Ramadan and fasting. What physical symptoms do we display? Because obviously the act of fasting does have an impact on our body, and it's really important that we can check in with ourselves and think about, well, okay, from a physical perspective, what do I lean towards? Do I become more irritable during Ramadan? When I'm fasting, do I notice that I keep myself to myself because I'm so overtired? And there's lots of different ways that you can combat that by identifying your main triggers of stress. Thinking about the mental aspect. So obviously the mental health side of fasting is a really interesting one, the effects that it has on your body, mind and soul. But when it comes to stress, it's really, really important to think about how stress affects you psychologically, because obviously the pressures of fasting, it's something we want to do, but you want to balance out your stress as well. So when you've got your day-to-day life stress, it's really important that you think about what is actually causing your stress, what your capacity is to cope, and therefore what techniques you can use to help yourself cope with those stressful triggers whilst you are fasting or whilst you are trying to make the best out of this holy month. So if you imagine that we each have a stress bucket, they're all different shapes and sizes depending on your capacity to cope. So everything that goes in, like water, is fluid, from getting stuck in traffic, miserable weather, an upcoming exam or a deadline, or maybe an argument or something to do with relationships or your family life or anything else you've got going on, all goes in. Now, what happens when you pour water into a bucket eventually? What's going to happen? It overflows, exactly. So that's just identifying the fact that when stress gets too much, it will overflow, and that will take a toll on your body, your mind, your soul. Especially during Ramadan, we want to try and it's not about avoiding it, it's about managing it better so that we can make the most out of the holy month. So if you imagine that you've got taps or holes drilled into the bucket, what happens to the water then? It leaks. Yeah, it comes out. And the idea is that no matter how much water you pour into your stress bucket or how much stress you are actually going through, if you have the right taps and the right kind of mechanism to let that water flow out, it will never really overflow as much or as often. Now, what those taps are is entirely up to you. These are the tools and techniques and activities which maintain your well-being, and it's individual. No two kind of activities may sit with the same people. And it's really important to think about what actually works. Everyone talks about self-care, everyone talks about going for a walk or going for a run, but that does not suit everyone, and that's okay. It's about finding what works for you. Now, you can see safety behaviours is actually adding water back into the bucket. Does anyone know what safety behaviours are or has come across the term before? No? So when we talk about mental health, there are obviously things that when you are stressed, you kind of lean towards. Now in the secular world, we might look at kind of drugs, alcohol, that kind of thing. It's that same effect, that short-term reward that's actually adding more stress into the bucket. So even if it's, let's say, every time you go through a really difficult time, you pick up the phone to your best friend or the same person repeatedly. It's that reliance on something which is actually not that great in the long run. Yes, going to friends and family is super important, getting support is really, really important, but if you think about maybe the effects that has on your relationship, or what if that person is, doesn't have the time to pick up the phone or isn't around for whatever reason, you are relying on that person or you're relying on that tool or that technique. And it's really important to think about what safety behaviours we do. And it's a difficult one because sometimes I feel like we automatically think that those safety behaviours are helping us. And maybe they are, for a little bit, like worrying. Some people say that actually worrying is helpful to me because it helps me prepare. If I know that I've got everything sorted, definitely not talking about myself, if I've got everything sorted the night before and I've rigidly checked everything and I've packed and I'm checking, yeah, it's great because I know what I'm going to do for the next day, but how much is that benefiting me? Is that the best use of my time? And it's really important to think about what is going into your stress bucket, so those stressful triggers, but also what are you getting out of it and what safety behaviours can you try and avoid, and i.e. leading on to breaking bad habits. So, breaking bad habits. Obviously this is one that often comes up a lot, especially during Ramadan. We're letting go of food and drink, we're letting go of other bad habits that we feel like we have, and we're trying to build up new ones. But before we build up new ones, it's often an opportunity to break those bad habits and find a way to build yourself a new routine. We will be going through tips on how to build a new routine, but I think it's really important to think about how you break those bad habits. Some people maybe think about going cold turkey, whatever that thing is, we're not here to judge or anything, whatever you're thinking about breaking, being it small or large, there are some things that you can do to really think about the most sustainable way of breaking those bad habits. And of course, Ramadan being the best way to work through all of this. Make the intention. Think about what is it that you are wanting to do more of or less of. Break it down and make smart goals. So really think about spreading it out. Sometimes we go into this, okay, it's Ramadan, I'm going to get rid of it completely. And there's nothing wrong with having that mentality, but how sustainable is that? How far are you going to get? And if you think you can, by all means, I'm not here to stop you, but it's more about, okay, if we want to make it more sustainable, breaking it down and making more SMART goals. I don't know if you've come across SMART goals before. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time specific. If you are able to tick those off as you're going through your goals, you're more likely to make it more sustainable. And spread it out across Ramadan. There's no rush to, okay, in the first week I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to do more of X, Y, Z. Plan out your time. There's nothing wrong with saying, okay, I'm going to do a little bit across a longer period of time. Staying away from your triggers. I feel like this is a bit of a sensitive topic, perhaps. And it doesn't matter what that trigger is. If you staying away from that thing is what is going to help you, there is nothing wrong with doing that. Be that people, social media accounts, looking at who we follow, who pops up on our For You page, or who's constantly there. We don't realise often what that trigger is. Have you ever felt stressed during the day and you're thinking, why do I feel like this? Why do I feel low? Why do I feel overwhelmed? It could have a smaller trigger that you've subconsciously picked up, like with social media. Places, people, or specific objects, if they're near you, if it's like outside, out of mind, it quite literally does work like that. If you put it outside, whatever that thing is, or you put that thing into sight, let's say it's, learning to recite Quran every single day, okay, put your Quran right where you can see it. How many times do we put it on a shelf, or put it to the side, or put it somewhere where, okay, yeah, we're used to it being there, but it's not fresh in our mind. There's something called a schema, and a schema is basically the idea that, let's say you walk into, if I asked you actually to describe a doctor's office, or the waiting area of a doctor's room. A schema is that idea that you can tell me exactly what's in that room without actually being in there. And that's usually what happens if I ask you to describe your bedroom, you know exactly where everything is. But actually if you change something in that schema, if you move something and keep it in your, where you can see it, you're actually more likely to probably remind yourself to do it. Reaching out for support if you need it. You are not alone, and sometimes trying to get through Ramadan or trying to be a better person and find a way of breaking those bad habits can be difficult, but it doesn't mean you have to do it alone. If you want to do it with a friend, accountability is great, like you kind of check in with each other, right, have you done this, have you done that? It's a really nice way because you're both on the same path, we're all doing Ramadan for the same reasons, and it's a nice way to kind of spread the load and the accountability or responsibility that you have on yourself. And Ramadan is a two-way street. You learn just as much from what you put in and what you get out. You know, the lectures that we attend, everything that we do, these are all contributing to breaking those bad habits without often us realising it. So the environment that you're in does also make a really big impact. And yeah, as we said before, taking smaller steps. So 30 days is actually not a long period of time, but if you break it down, you can make it even smaller. Think about week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and then look beyond. You know, sometimes we're like, okay, I'm going to make a change in Ramadan and I'm going to sustain it till next year. My next Ramadan, I'll still be doing it, which is amazing, and inshallah we will get the opportunity to actually do that. But if you are finding it difficult, that's okay. Think about the first 30 days first and then look beyond Ramadan. And be kind to yourself and remember why you started. We mentioned that before, the why of what you're doing anything for is your motivation. If you keep an eye on why you're doing something, or maybe it's a responsibility, maybe it's something that you feel like is a tradition, not tradition, but you know, you're used to doing it and you appreciate doing it each year. Or maybe it's, you know, that you do want to learn something new, or you do want to break a bad habit. It's about whatever's individual, and you never have to share that with anyone. It's whatever you find most appealing in this month that is going to push you forward. Now it's about setting that routine, which again, we all often do by default. This time of the year comes around, you're like, right, okay, maybe you've got traditions at home, or things that you like to do, or places that you like to go, and actually getting into routine, not that it's mundane, but sometimes comes naturally, but sometimes we want to change that routine, or maybe, you know, when you have and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, your relationship with your spirituality and your relationship with religion is a whole different mindset. And sometimes getting into that routine is really difficult, and maybe sometimes you feel that, and anyone can feel this, myself included, that you're like, oh, you know what, everyone else is getting into a routine, why can't I? Why do I feel, you know, sometimes, have you ever come across that feeling where you're like, it doesn't quite feel like Ramadan. I don't know why, but it doesn't. And that's okay. It's about getting yourself into a routine that works for you. And there's some ways that you can do that. Now this is something that we do actually in treatment, so I kind of adapted it to kind of talk through kind of that aspect when you are kind of thinking about creating a new routine in Ramadan. So think about what you first do, what you currently do, and this is what we say in treatment as well to clients is, okay, well there's no point me giving you a schedule and being like, right, this is what you have to do Monday to Friday, go and do it, because it's never going to work until you know what you currently do. So you need to mark out what you normally do in Ramadan, how you think of that, pen and paper in your mind, whatever you prefer. But think about what you usually do, and then it's easy to make changes, adaptations, add things, remove things. It makes that process a little bit easier. And then splitting your activities into routine, pleasurable and necessary. So again, this is something we do in treatments, there's a lot of research behind that. But having a balance of these activities is really important. So think about, when it comes to your routine, what do you currently do and what do you want to do? Whether it's got to do with kind of suhoor, sahri, iftar, extra ibadat, whatever it is that you want to change, think about what you classify as routine first. Pleasurable, so family and friends, spending time with them, going for iftar, community work or charity work, feeding others, creating new traditions. These are all things that you might want to do. And the best thing about pleasurable is that it's entirely up to you. What you choose to do, it will vary. And maybe you want to do it with other people, maybe it's something for yourself. And the necessary, so there's certain things that you might want to think about and certain things that you want to maybe keep tabs on, but it's basically anything that if you do not do it, there will be a consequence. And when it comes to religion, there's obviously a lot there that we do need to be mindful of. And there's a lot of preparations, things that you can do before, things that you can do during, and just keeping tabs of it as you get through the holy month. Now, when you are looking at that balance, and when you are looking at your schedule and thinking about moving forward, break it down. There is no rush. There's no rush to fill your schedule up with all different kinds of things. It's okay to, even if you do one different thing each week, just making sure that there's a balance. We talk about the analogy of a stool. If you imagine a three-legged stool, and each of the three legs represents a different kind of activity, so routine, pleasurable and necessary, what happens if one of the legs is shorter of the other two? It's going to collapse, right? You're not going to be able to rely on it, you can't sit on it. You need stability, and that's exactly what your schedule should be like. So thinking about that balance and thinking about how it should reinforce the rest of your week. And review it. There is nothing that says that everything is set in stone. When you're creating a routine, it's really important to remember that things change. Life changes, there's life ups and downs. And there's an opportunity for you to think about what does need changing. If you do that something one week and you think, okay, I'm not getting through that, maybe I need to cut it down. Or maybe there's something where you can increase it and you've got an opportunity to think about what went well, what didn't go well, and what do you need to change. And aim to make it sustainable. I think this is probably the key thing that hopefully you will take away from this, is that it's all about sustainability. And if that means scaling back, if that means taking a step back and making it into smaller stages, that's absolutely fine. But some things can continue beyond Ramadan, or maybe better for the next year. And if you take those small steps and instead of trying to jump into a brand new routine with lots of different things, it might not last beyond Ramadan. And sometimes that's what we find, and myself included. You have an aim to do something, you set up a routine, you go for it, you do as much as you can, you push through the 30 days and beyond, and then a month after, 2 months after, you start to dwindle. And it's very normal, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, okay, if we do want to make it sustainable, it might be easier to just take those smaller steps instead. Now let's think about religion and mental health. They do go hand in hand, and there's a common misconception that when you have mental health issues or anything going on with your mental health, that you are severing your relationship with God and the only way forward is to pray more. And unfortunately that is not the case, and hopefully no one walks away with that narrative, because that can be more detrimental. It's not the case, and actually it's your faith in Allah that can help you alongside other forms of support. If you need therapy, if you need medication, if you need more support, that's absolutely fine. But actually it's your relationship with Allah that will guide you through and help you with your mental health. So it's just about thinking, when we are speaking to others, or when we're speaking to ourselves as well actually, the phrases that we use, we need to make sure that we use the phrases that are going to do more good than harm. So, what happens in reflection? Now, Ramadan is known as the month of reflection. You know how many times we hear from the Mimbar, or we hear from lecturers and speakers, take the time, reflect, speak to Allah, do this, do that, and that's all great. But what can happen with reflection if potentially we're not reflecting in the right way? We can start overthinking about the past. Well, last Ramadan, I wasn't able to do this. Or last Ramadan, I did this when I shouldn't have. Or last Ramadan, it was so much easier. Why is this hard now? Or last Ramadan was harder. How am I gonna move away from that and move into creating a better life? Or worrying about the future. So what if I can't keep this up? What if beyond Ramadan I can't maintain this new routine, or carry on with this activity, or see this, build on this friendship that you've created, or that connection with Allah that you've created? Those are worries about the future, which actually we don't know the outcome to, and that's a benefit, which I'll probably come back to. And that can in turn create a negative narrative. So sometimes that can feed into that, we call it vicious cycle. So your thoughts, emotions, physical symptoms and behaviours, they all interact with each other, and that's based on the CBT model, cognitive behavioural therapy. And actually, if we feed into that negative narrative, we can build this whole bigger world narrative of, well, what's the point? Well, if I can't do this, and if I can't keep up, and things are so different from last year, what's the point? And that in turn can affect your self-talk. So the way that you think about yourself, the way that you talk to yourself, the way that you then present yourself comes through. I can't do this, I don't deserve to. We talk a lot about forgiveness in this holy month. Inshallah, we're all forgiven. But sometimes that can feed into that narrative. There's that pressure, that responsibility, that kind of self-awareness that kicks in when it comes to reflection that, oh, well, what if I don't deserve to be forgiven? Or what if I haven't been forgiven? Or how do I make sure I'm being forgiven? Obviously, we remember that Allah is the most merciful and the most kind, and there is those, that religious aspect that can kick in. But it can happen during reflection. When you're sitting with yourself, it's very easy to fall into that vicious cycle. And therefore, it affects our worldview. If we're thinking about it ourselves, that's what we're projecting to the outside world. There isn't any good that comes out of X, Y, Z. What's the point? I can't do this. And then you might let go of it altogether. Now, that's what can happen with reflection. We obviously want to talk about the good side of reflection as well. And reflection is about religion. Obviously, we're encouraged in different ways, and we'll talk about the other ways to reflect. But we want to think about, how does spirituality feed into our mental health? there is tawakkul, and there is trusting in Allah no matter what, knowing that He is the best of planners, and we can rely on Him. And I know sometimes it seems as simple as saying, just remind yourself of tawakkul, remind yourself of Allah. People say that very casually, and it is true, but it's how you sit with yourself and how you spend that time reflecting. What does that mean to you? It's one statement, and it will mean something very different to each of us, and how you connect it to tawakkul and how you really reinforce it is more important. And therefore, when you reinforce it with yourself, it's an opportunity to reflect that with your akhlaq. So the way that you treat with others with respect. We understand mental health, we understand stress, we've talked about breaking bad habits, and all of these things that we rely on ourselves. But actually, what does that mean for other people? Is someone else trying to break a bad habit? Is someone else struggling with their relationship with Allah? Is someone else really trying to find a routine during Ramadan that they're struggling with? So it's important to be mindful of the way that we treat others, but also how we treat ourselves. We spoke earlier about forgiving yourself. It is really important to change that narrative that, I can't change myself. I've made a mistake. I keep making mistakes. It's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's how you move forward and how you treat yourself and how you change your narrative that will help you move forward as well. And obviously there's this ayat from the Quran. So Allah does not burden a soul beyond that it can bear. We've had this so many times. Like how many times, when you've got a lecturer who is leaning towards mental health topics, they bring this verse a lot. But maybe this is an opportunity for you to reflect and to really think about what this means in terms of your spirituality, how mental health and religion go hand in hand, how Islam and mental health go hand in hand. He will never burden you with anything you cannot deal with. If you think back, maybe whether it's Ramadan, or maybe it's something else, or maybe it's Muharram, maybe it's Safar, or maybe it's all these other holy months, or maybe it's just something really difficult in your life that you've gone through, you are still here today. You are still in a place where you have stepped forward, even if the step is this big. Progress is progress, no matter how small that progress is. And I think this is a really nice reminder that Allah's got your back. I know it sounds really cheesy and cliche, but He has always got your back. And we always talk about, life being a test. It's exactly that. But that test will never be too difficult that you can't complete it. And it's an opportunity to really think about what that means to you and your spirituality, especially during the month of Ramadan. So let's move on to more practical stuff. And kind of combining all of this, what are the tools and techniques that you can move forward with in the month, outside the month, and hopefully in your everyday life as well. So we spoke about the disadvantages or what can happen during a reflection moment or when you are trying to reflect. And there are some more positive things or some more tools and techniques that you can use to help reflect better and more proactively, as we say. Journaling is a really nice one. I've seen some really beautiful Ramadan journals in the last couple of years. But whether it's freehand or guided journaling, it's a really good opportunity to put pen to paper and really offload what's on your mind. Sometimes we feel very overwhelmed, very chaotic, very stressed, maybe you've got a lot going on in personal aspects of your life, in academics, in work, and you're trying to focus on Ramadan at the same time. It's overwhelming and you feel like crashing every night because you haven't got the time. Journaling is a really great way to kind of offload all of that mindset as well. Writing a letter to yourself, I've actually tried this myself. I know it sounds, again, very cliche, but it was something that we did for a course a few years ago, and the benefits of actually reading back that letter, it's mind-blowing, because beyond the cliche side, when you are reading it, you realise how far you've come, and you realise all the changes that you have made. Maybe it's for the good, maybe it's for the bad, whether it's helping you to motivate yourself to keep going, or motivate yourself to make a change for the better. And it's a really nice way, maybe by the end of this Ramadan, and then you're reading it for next Ramadan, it's a nice opportunity to see how life has changed, or whether you have been able to be sustainable, what has changed, or what has gone for the better. Guided meditation, now if we think of this from a more religious perspective, there are opportunities to use this in the perspective of Dua Kamel, Surah Yasin, Hadith Iqsa. There's beautiful recitations on YouTube and Weird, a beautiful recitation of Sifat Sajadiyah. These are your guided meditations. If you think about it from that perspective, there's all this secular research on meditation, but we have that at our fingertips. And again, Dua Majid, Joshna Kabir, these are the opportunities in Ramadan that we can be utilising to really reflect on the words of Allah. Spending time in nature, get out and about, get some fresh air, see the greenery. There's a lot of research, and I feel like I don't probably need to speak too much about that. You can reflect with others. You don't have to do this alone. Speaking to a friend or a family member, someone that you trust, someone that you're on the same wavelength with. When you have that deep chat and you're like, oh, you get it. And not everyone will. And that's okay. No one's talking about distancing yourself from that person. All we're saying is find the person that's right for you. no matter what that relationship is. And sometimes it's strangers. You click with someone, you think, oh, you know what, we could have a really good chat about this. And it's very uplifting and a really nice way to reflect on how to move forward. Discussion circles in the community, that opportunity to reflect within more organised circles. And again, we're all on the same page, we're all here for a reason, we're all doing the same things, and that's the Muslim Ummah generally. I'm not just talking about, our own community, but in the wider community, it's a beautiful opportunity during Ramadan to have those conversations with people who maybe we don't necessarily have conversations with, but we can. And obviously your conversations with God. I think this is a really nice one because we often forget, I feel like sometimes I forget that you can have a very casual conversation with God. It doesn't have to necessarily always be through dua or through Quran or namaz, whatever. Yes, there are more organised ways of doing that, but you can just offload as you would to a friend, because I feel like that's exactly what he's there for. And that way of reflection is almost a little bit more sentimental to yourself and actually can lift a big weight if you feel that works for you. And speaking to a professional, I feel like I wouldn't be a mental health professional if I didn't bring this up, but it's okay to get support. There are many different ways that you can get support. It can be, if you are, I'll be very frank with you guys, if you are in crisis, or if you are feeling suicidal, or if there are any notions like that, whether it's yourself or others, you can notice it in other people. If you're not sure what to do, there's always the mental health direct line, 111, and other organisations like Samaritans and Mind. But you can also go through therapy, and therapy doesn't have to be for when you've got a problem. There are plenty of people that just say, look, I need to pick me up, I need to get organised, I need to just process my thoughts, and that's what a professional's there for, to guide you through those thought behaviours and making changes where necessary. Now, we've got back to this question. I'd like you to answer it again. Think about now, in this moment, on a scale of 0 to 10 or 1 to 10, how overwhelmed do you feel in this moment? Think of the first number that comes to your mind, don't overthink it. I know you guys missed the beginning part, but just think about it now and I'll explain how it works in a moment. Just the first number that comes to your mind. Okay, I'm going to presume that you come up with a number. Don't change the number, try and stick to the number. Now, one of these techniques, it's a great way to check in with yourself. This in itself is a technique. So I asked you at the beginning, and I asked you at the end. So actually, if you think about that number that you started off with, maybe it was higher or lower than the number that you're thinking about now. Maybe it's exactly the same. I know my number's gone down. I feel more relaxed, which is great. But can you see how your mind, your body, your soul, how you feel in the moment changes? I mean, I don't think it's been that long, but even in the space of half an hour, 20 minutes, your body, your soul, your mind, it all changes on a day-to-day basis, and this is a really great way to check in with yourself. Do it for your sleeping habits, do it for your stress, do it for anxiety, low mood, anger, anything, because you have the opportunity to, you can make it all, statistical, and, if you're into maths, if you're into statistics, if you're into kind of actually seeing what the numbers mean, great. Or if you're doing it just to check in with yourself and think about, you know what, my number's gone down. Why has it gone down? I went for a walk, saw a friend, spent time with family, spoke to a professional, did what I needed to do, got through my checklist, whatever it is that you did, that's why your number went down. Maybe your number went up. Why did it go up? I felt triggered. I felt overwhelmed, stressed, my stress bucket is overwhelmed. There's different reasons why those numbers go up and down, and once you notice the patterns, it makes that process of setting routine, making changes, breaking bad habits a whole lot easier.